When you think about history, you probably picture giant monuments or famous battlefields, right? But sometimes the most incredible stories are hiding in plain sight in these quiet, everyday objects, things that just sit in an attic or an old box, waiting. Well, today we're going to pull on one of those threads.
Okay, so let's start right here. What you're seeing, on the surface, it's just an old book, a worn-out ledger, and a faded photograph. But these two things, they're the first clues to an absolutely remarkable story. A story about resilience, about vision, and really about the power of a single promise.
And that's the big question, isn't it? Eli Sterling. Who was he? Just a name stamped on a leather cover, a face you might otherwise pass by? But behind that name, wow, there's a journey that didn't just reshape his own life, it reshaped an entire community.
All right, so let's get into it. To really understand the story, we have to start at the very beginning. And it doesn't begin in a factory or a big city. Nope, it begins in a field, at this incredible moment in history when the whole world was basically being remade.
Can you just imagine for a second? You're 16 years old, you're in Georgia, and it's 1865. The Civil War has just ended. For Eli Sterling, emancipation, that wasn't the end of the story. It was the starting line. The world had just cracked wide open, and he was absolutely determined to build something new in that space.
But to build something, you need tools, right? And Eli just knew that the most important tool he could possibly have wasn't going to be a hammer or a plow. It was something way, way more powerful.
Literacy. Today, we think of it as just a basic skill, something everyone learns. But back then, in 1865, for a newly freed person, being able to read and write was a revolutionary act. It was the key to understanding contracts, to reading ledgers, to navigating a world that had been intentionally kept unreadable to you. It was literally the difference between being taken advantage of and taking control of your own life.
And this idea, it was really driven home by his mother, Eliza. Her words here, they weren't just comforting, they were a mission statement. This was the charge for his entire life. This ain't just freedom from, this is freedom to. That's such a profound shift in thinking, right? It's not just about what you're escaping, it's about what you can now build.
And that promise, that idea, it became his cornerstone. Everything he did, every single decision he made from that point on was built on that one powerful concept, the freedom to.
So the question is, how do you build on a promise like that? Well, armed with that idea and just this fierce determination, Eli makes his way to Atlanta. And you have to remember, this was a city literally rising from its own ashes. It was the perfect place for someone who wanted to forge a new future.
And his path is it's incredible. He gets to Atlanta in 1867 and starts at the very bottom, working in a garment factory. But then just 2 years later, that literacy, the skill he knew was so crucial, gets him promoted to a clerk. Now he's learning the books. He's understanding the business from the inside out. And get this, by 1875, just 8 years after he arrived, he owns the place. He goes from laborer to business owner. That is a meteoric rise, fueled by nothing but pure grit and smarts.
But here's the thing. Eli didn't just want to own a business. He wasn't just going to copy the model he'd seen. No way. He was going to create something totally new, built on a foundation of quality and dignity.
He calls it the Sterling Thread Mills. And his whole approach, what we're calling the Sterling Method, was absolutely revolutionary for the time. Okay, step 1, quality. He focused on making tough, durable denim and workwear. Step 2, and this is huge, he paid fair wages. And he taught his employees how to read. He'd literally hold lessons during breaks. And step 3, he reinvested his profits right back into the community, hiring more and more freedmen and women. You see, he wasn't just building a company, he was building up his people.
And you know what? It totally worked. By the late 1880s, his mill had about 50 employees. Now, 50 might not sound like a huge number today, but think about what that meant back then. That's 50 families. 50 families with stable jobs, with dignity, with new opportunities. That's not just a business, that's an anchor for the whole community. All because one guy believed in the freedom to build.
But Eli's vision, it was so much bigger than just the four walls of his factory. He didn't stop there. He understood that real, lasting strength wasn't just about one successful business. It was about building the infrastructure for an entire community to thrive. And look at the impact he had. This is amazing. He didn't just keep his money. He co-founded the Gate City Colored Banking Association to help other Black entrepreneurs get their start. He provided the money for people to buy homes. He even funded a school for Black children, making sure that the next generation had that freedom to learn that it changed his own life.
And on top of all that, he raised 5 kids of his own, all of them educated, ready to carry on the work. This is how you build a real legacy.
So Eli Sterling's story is obviously incredible. But you know what's just as incredible? It's not some lost myth. It was pieced together from actual records, from these little threads of history that are often way more accessible than you might think.
And that's why all this matters, beyond just being a really cool history lesson. His story was preserved in the records. And yours might be too. The same kinds of documents that brought Eli's story to life, they could be holding the keys to your own family's amazing story of resilience.
So you're probably wondering, okay, where would I even start? Well, here's some amazing resources. The Freedmen's Bureau records are an absolute goldmine for this era. The 1870 U.S. Census, that's a huge one because it was the first to list African Americans by name. You've got old black newspapers, local city directories, even just talking to family members and looking at old records you might have at home. Each one of these is a potential clue, a thread just waiting for you to pull on it.
You know, when you think about it, every family history is a story of resilience. Eli Sterling took a simple promise from his mother and wove an entire future from it. His ledger, yeah, it tracked profits, but his life charted a path of empowerment. It showed how one person's vision can truly lift up an entire community. And that really leaves us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? What amazing stories are waiting to be discovered in your family's past?